Welcome to the HiRSE Seminar Series on Research Software Engineering in Helmholtz and beyond.
All right, thanks a lot for the introduction, Claire. And yes, I'll talk to you about an initiative that the Helmholtz Association started actually over almost 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, we had the mandate from the Helmholtz Members Assembly, which is essentially all scientific and administrative directors of all 18 Helmholtz centers, to develop a multidimensional quality indicator for data products. And with the goal of broadening and improvement the evaluation of science in Helmholtz, and then, kind of jumping onto the train that started there around data publications, data stewardship, and so on, also by all the funders. We very early on essentially also said, this is not just data, there's a specific form of data out there, which is called software, which is slightly different. And we should include this alongside of this initiative, and that was easy, also approved already by a small group of the directors that also worked alongside the in this project all the time. So what happens, every time the directors give out such a task to all the Helmholtz centers, a task group is formed, which essentially means that each center sends at least one delegate to this task group to make sure that their interests and expertise are contributed to this endeavor. And for us, this task group was formed. You actually find the names if you go to the Helmholtz Open Science Office. This is essentially where we're structurally associated with. You find all the members there, all the former members. And we were tasked with, well, go ahead and do this. And so since March 2022, we've been working on this. We very early on decided to split our work into 3 groups, essentially a whole group working on overall strategies and syncing all this. And then we split the groups into 2 subgroups, one working on research data and the other group working on research software, because as you probably also all aware, they are from how you're looking at them and how you're looking at quality of them, actually 2 different things. And what we also said very early on, we have no idea how many research data and research software publications the various Helmholtz centers actually are. So what kind of numbers we're aiming for, because depending on how many of those products we're talking about, you have to have different levels of automation in the background. So what we also said very early on is we'd like to have an basic indicator for us as an internal tool, where we essentially ask the centers also early on. So starting with the year 2023, so that's essentially looking back for all the publications that happened in 2022. We'd like centers to tell us how many data publications and software publications that are citable through a DOI did they produce in that year. And use this also as a basis for this development of the quality indicator that I'll tell you about now. In those first year, we also reached the consensus that we don't just want to grab one quick, easy number, which we started to call the H-index trap. Just because it's easy to generate a number doesn't mean that it really actually reflects the quality of research software. So we wanted to have a multidimensional indicator that is valuable for everybody involved, that covers all aspects of research software. So all classes or tiers of software, from the very small script to very large infrastructure software projects, and also works for all of our research fields, which are also quite diverse in how they're dealing with software. Since we saw this diversity, we also said, okay, we cannot actually judge the quality of each individual product. We actually have to look at the processes that lead to the products. So let's focus on this, and also integrate well-established processes or concepts that are existing left and right as well, because we're not doing this in the small Helmholtz island. Other people are also looking into this as well. So the idea was that we split this essentially into those multiple dimensions where we say, okay, those are generic criteria, dimensions that reflect quality. And then for each of those dimensions, those are certain attributes that contribute to this dimension that, are then specifically also measurable in their quality. And then for each of those attributes, you can use a maturity model to then measure the quality of each individual attribute to how well established the process is to have the best possible quality for this attribute. And then essentially come up with a magic way to summarize all those individual numbers, which I'll present later on. For the, what's already out there, FAIR cannot be ignored. And actually, it also helps a whole lot that because a whole bunch of other people have also started their work based on the FAIR principles. And it's also great because FAIR is available both for research data and research software. And it also has been, published so many times that even all our management know of FAIR. So it's also easier to communicate what we're doing to the Helmholtz management if we're basing everything on those principles. So here are the dimensions that we developed. So we essentially reuse the FAIR dimensions and extend them with additional dimensions where we say, okay, those are also specific things that we care about in the quality of a publication. So while and honestly, since the FAIR criteria mainly pertain to metadata and not really look at the quality of the individual product, we added for the data the curation process. So what are the processes that actually ensure that the data that is published is also of high quality? And for research software, we added two things. One's the scientific embedding, which is kind of the equivalent to this curation process. So is the software scientifically relevant? Is the software that fulfills the community best practices or good practices? And then, of course, we also we couldn't stop by all the actual software engineering metrics that are also available that are not covered by FAIR at all. So that's what we call technical groundedness. So how well are actually the software engineering aspects in the research software? And then we went through all the attributes and identified, or actually initially we had a very large checklist of things, and then we essentially reassembled those checklists where we said, okay, now what are attributes? Where is this specific attribute or this specific thing we're checking actually attributing to? And it could also be multiple things. So some of them are actually counted in more than one dimension. So for example, in the findable dimension, we have the question of, okay, where are you actually publishing this? Is it in an open publication repository? Sorry. How do you deal with versioning so that you can actually identify an individual release of the software? How do you deal with identifiers that you actually can reference this software release, this software publication well, and does it also contain rich metadata that actually describes this software publication in a full extent, and it's not just the name of the software and the URL, for example. And then for each of those individual attributes, we've took some inspiration from the COBIT maturity model. But essentially, if you look up maturity models on Wikipedia, COBIT is just one version of them, where you essentially say, there are certain levels of maturity, and for 0, actually you don't know anything. For 1, there are already some things in place, and starting at level 3, you want to have very specific and clear defined processes in place. And what's important is, as you see essentially here with those indicate with those arrows, all those levels of maturity are accumulative, meaning that this also gives us a chance, or if you want to reach level 3, you have to fulfill all requirements of level 1 and 2 as well, which is great because this gives us the chance to also introduce different aspects that also improve quality of one of those attributes through those levels. which makes sure that we have some basic stuff in level 1, and for level 2 you do the basic stuff and something additional. For level 3 you do all of this plus maybe something else, and so on. And this actually worked better than we expected when we did this. So to show you an example for the very first attribute, for example, open publication repository. Essentially, 0 is person just claims that their software. We have no idea where it is. 1 is it is in some kind of online repository, and it could be an internal web page where you just have a URL that links to the thing. 2 is some kind of description is available, further information. So there is some README file alongside the software, and so on. Structured metadata description, for example, following data site is available. And for 4, it's the repository that you're using to publish the software is actually listed in an overarching metadata repository that also has this kind of implies certain quality requirements of your actual repository to be part of this meta repository. All right, how do we aggregate then? The idea is to also give us some degrees of freedom, that we essentially say, so for each of the attributes in a dimension, you reach a certain maturity level. So in this example, a 4, a 2, and a 3. And then we do a weighted average to bring this to the score for the overall score of the dimension. At the moment, quite bluntly, we are actually doing we weight all attributes the same. So essentially, we're just doing arithmetic mean here. But essentially, as we still have some time to bring this fully into production, this gives us a chance to then also value a certain attribute higher than other attributes if we find this beneficial to reflect the good practices of the community. And then once you do this for each dimension, you can start creating those radar plots here, where essentially say my product scores like this on those dimensions. So in findable, I'm pretty good. In interoperable, I'm not so good. Accessible, also not so good. Now this example for the data product curation is okay, and reusable, I'm actually quite good. And then so this is actually something that's quite valuable if you want to improve processes, because then you can actually create those radar plots for all your data products or all your software products, and try to identify patterns of where your institution is already doing pretty good, or where you might see some deficiencies that you can address with trainings, better tooling, and so on. You can also cluster it by the tier of the software, the class of the software. So of course, expectation is that your small analysis scripts that you just published as a supplement to a paper don't have to fulfill the same quality requirements as software that is an integral part of your research infrastructure, for example. Now, the task of the group was also that we wanted to reuse this mechanism to answer the question, how many or what's the quality of research software publication of the Helmholtz centers in a given year. And we decided also, together with the feedback from the directors of all centers, that we'll use what we call a 0-1 approach. So we define a level of minimum criteria for each dimension. And if your publication is above this minimum in all dimensions, then it counts as 1. And then and of course, then the whole number of the center is then all ones of a given publication year as the sum. Also, an incentive to improve the quality. So the next knob that we also have as a working group is, of course, we can increase the requirements of the minimum polygon over time, as we see that the good practices in the communities are improving. We can then raise the minimum level to be counted, and thus also providing a stronger incentives to the centers to also improve their practices around research software as well. We did a test run where essentially, as you can tell, for all the dimensions, all the attributes, it's a long list. and all the levels of maturity. So essentially, it's a very large Excel table that is, even if you print it out in A0, is still a pretty small font. And we did this as a pen and paper exercise where we essentially asked the members of the task group to pick up to 3 research data publications or 3 research software publications and go to the authors of those and ask them those questions that are there to get some idea of what things are. And we did this a year ago. What we learned from this is the concept in general works. So we get results that actually align with what we expected it to be, and also what we are seeing when talking to other people working in this type of assessment. So it works as expected. The amount of automation we could do is somewhat limited. So many of the questions we're asking, we cannot have tools that automatically evaluate those questions and give us the numbers. And also something that was surprising at first, but in reflection actually isn't, is that for the data publications, we saw that all the publications within a single repository actually receive very similar results. Which, in retrospective, the data repositories actually set up those processes, what you need to do to actually have a data publication there. And they, in results, also ensure quality through this mechanism. So that wasn't surprising. So what we what the conclusions of us were after we've done the exercise and then a small internal workshop to look at the results is that we'll definitely postpone the evaluation of some attributes until they can actually be evaluated and implemented later. And for the data, as we'll do a first implementation step by actually looking at repositories and building and working with people from the repositories and so on to build the scores for each repository, and then essentially a publication in a repository immediately automatically gets the score of the repository. And then, so automation on a dataset level is maybe something we can do later on, but for actually to get this started, this is not necessary. For software we learned that we actually have to look at individual software publications, mainly because software is so different. A small script scores totally different from something that is used in a project, so in a larger scope, than something that has been an integral part of research infrastructure for many years. So we actually have to look at each individual product. And also we had to answer the question, at what point does a research software actually count for a center? And there we said those 3 filters, which essentially where we said, okay, the software publication, and let me be precise here, we're always talking about software publications here. So we're not talking actually about the development cycle, which happens, at GitHub, GitLab, or somewhere internally, but actually the publications that are done for releases of the software. So if that has an author from one of the reporting centers, the center may count this. It qualifies as research software. And here we're using the DFG definition, which essentially is the same definition that Adore also uses, which reflects back to the FAIR for Research Software paper that I also showed there, which it seems to be the definition that everybody agrees upon now. And we also say the software has to do a release because as we all know, software is a living product. You constantly update it. And there we essentially said we won't count, or since software also distinguishes it sometimes between releases and bug fixes, so updates can be either. We leave it up to the authors of the software to define what a release is, but they can count no more than 1 release per year, depending on what their release cycle is. And then we'll do the evaluation of the individual software publications through 2 means. Automated through tools, that's definitely what we want to do. So no manual counting, no forms or whatever. And this can either be done, if the authors themselves enter the software into the Helmholtz Research Software Directory. So we put essentially the questionnaire or all the attributes that we're asking for also into the Research Software Directory as metadata. And what can be harvested automatically with tools will already be answered, but additional information can also be provided by the authors of the software. Or if people don't want to use the RSD, then of course each Helmholtz Center is also free to develop their own individual process and their individual mechanism for running the automated tools that we provide for answering the questions and then doing those aggregations themselves. The attributes and maturity levels that cannot be currently covered by automated tools will be skipped until they are available. That is also clear. So no center will be punished for something that cannot be evaluated at the moment in an automated fashion, because it was also made very clear to us that the amount of additional work that we can burden the centers with has to be kept minimal. One of the tools that we want to use is actually a product of something Helmholtz internal, of the Helmholtz metadata collaboration funded project called HiRSE, which is a tool that can harvest metadata out of software development repositories that is available there, and with a CI/CD pipeline, take this information and bring this into a format that can be, so that this information can be pushed to other mechanisms. Mainly it was built to automate this publication process, which is essentially also what we want to do. So since we're talking about software publications, the tool might already be used by the research software authors to do their Zenodo or wherever they want to publish release publications. And we're tagging onto this by essentially having more plugins to if we look at the pipeline like this, so essentially there is the CI event, there's this harvesting step of the metadata, and there we can look at additional metadata information or write plugins for things that are not really necessary for a publication in Zenodo, but we are interested in as part of this KPI process. Then this, all those harvested information is processed into a JSON file. There is a potential curation step in between if you want to, and then this information is deposited, for example, to the research software directory for just the metadata entry, or to a publication repository, and in the post-process step, actually also the metadata in the software repository can also be updated again with this maybe curated or enhanced metadata information. As I already showed, forgot the link, helmholtz.software is where our research software directory lives. And there you already see a whole bunch of metadata that we already pull from the software development repository. And it is our goal that not publicly visible, but internally visible, we also make to each center, we make those software quality attributes visible, so that if centers want to improve their research software, that they can also take a look at this. There is a follow-up HMC funded project called Software Card, which also has this. Here you already see the radar plot. They also have this on their in their to-do list to help with dashboards around research software, where they also take what we're doing here with the indicator work group also into account. So this might also be a good mechanism for us to actually generate those radar plots automatically. To show you essentially how does a center now get to the number that they have to report. Let me just follow the one for the software publication, since this is what we're interested in. Essentially, we everything that passes the 3 filters I mentioned will be given into the automated tooling processes, where essentially each software publication gets its individual score in all the dimensions, and then there is a tool. So we are essentially internally generating those numbers for each publication, and then there is a tool that checks all the software that fulfills the minimum requirements and sums them all up. And then what we are passing back is something that's also the member assembly approved, as we said this later on. So even though they tasked us to set out or the initial task was to produce a single number, covering data publications. We're now passing a tuple showing all data and software publications of a given year that are above the minimum quality requirements that a center has authored. And that's then what will be reported. So where are we now and what's still going on? The members, so this concept that I've just shown you has been approved by the members' assembly in September of last year with a very positive reception. They was very praised that we didn't jump onto some, GitHub indicator or number that, would have been easy. But that we actually did a very scientific approach that looks into everything that contributes to the quality of software, and also take into account that not everything can be measured, and that we'll add those things as time moves on and good practices improve and means for measuring things are then available. The timeline that what we have to do is the goal is that this is fully functional and delivering as expected with the beginning of our next Helmholtz funding period, which is POF, stands for Program Oriented Funding. This is the internal abbreviation of how our funding periods, and then this is a Roman 5. So the fifth funding period starts in 2028. So essentially, the first reports will be written in Q1 2029. So up until that time, we have these reporting years 25 through 27 to to fine tune all the knobs. As you saw, we have multiple variables where you can actually tweak things and tools and so on. So to really get this into production. And this also means that the last year where we get the basic numbers will be the current reporting year. So essentially last year, the publications of last year. We have worked to finalize this criteria catalog, so all the attributes, all the levels of maturity until the end of this year. We've also, done these overarching questions of, how to filter when does a data publication, when does the software publication count, and we've defined the minimal polygon, and we have now communicated all of this to the people within Helmholtz. First, we prepared handouts to the people writing the report so that they know what's coming, and did the virtual Q&A session already in January. Just last week, we met in Jülich for the Helmholtz Research Software Forum and discussed this also for a day with our peers that are also working on research software, and gathered their feedback on where we should pay special attention to documentation, what are things that we might have missed, and so on. So we'll have this. The group plans on a similar format later on April, May. Still trying to find a good venue where this could be attached to, or a place where to run this individual workshop, so that we also have the feedback from the broad community now. And then we'll work on getting all the tools in place, getting the documentation in place, and have this be done by the summer break. So that we essentially have the second half of the year for centers to already try it out and do some more fine-tuning so that we get the early adoption problems out of the way as well. And the task group remains, even though we've delivered to the member assembly on the task that we started out with. It's also clear that we are still needed to actually get the overall process done and everything working. All right, this is what I wanted to show. If you want to take a look, those are the links of the Open Science Office that facilitates all of this work. And I'm happy for your questions now.
Thank you for watching our seminar. Please check out the slides on Zenodo linked below, and see you next time.